On November 21st, 1992, Tom Monfils disappeared after a workplace dispute. A day later, his body was found in a pulp vat with a 50-pound weight wrapped around his neck. Over 30 years later, exactly who killed Monfils remains a mystery. Welcome to the Monfils 6 podcast. My name is Damon Schneider.
My name's Mike Potchell.
To start off today, I just wanted to mention that we're on another true crime podcast called Crack House Chronicles, and it was a great experience. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Mike, how did you think it turned out?
I thought it turned out great. It was nice talking with Donnie and Dale, and again, took us by surprise, at least took me by surprise when they reached out to us, and really meant a lot when they did, and I thought we had a really great conversation with them about this case.
So be sure to check out that episode that we're on for sure of the Crack House Chronicles. I just wanted to make a few corrections on a previous episode. I should state too that we're a few weeks ahead in terms of putting out episodes. So Donnie and Dale, they won't hear this for a little while yet. This is the first time we've recorded since we did your podcast. On a previous episode, I said that Detective Winkler had mentioned Coop 9, and I thought that he had made an error. But that was actually an error on my part, because what he meant was that the people who came out of the coop to beat up Monfils came out of Coop 9. The Tom talk occurred in Coop 7, so that was the error with that. Also on the Crack House Chronicles, I was asked a specific question: were any of the Monfils 6 in the same prison? And I said no. But that is incorrect. Dale Bastian and Michael Johnson were both at Stanley Correctional Institute. And then finally, when we were on their podcast, we were pronouncing the name David Weiner, and they were pronouncing it as David Wiener. I guess it could be either way. I want to pronounce it correctly. So we're going off of the Anthony Weiner, the person who got in trouble for sending a picture, an explicit picture. He spells his name Weiner. And so that's why we think that we're going to call him David Weiner. Does that sound good, Mike?
Right, because our point is that David Weiner spells it Wiener.
So we hope that we're right. If we're not, we're sorry. It's not. We don't want to be disrespectful at all to these people who are involved with this case whatsoever. So tonight's episode is Dodie and Scott Stop By. So Kutska was actually in prison at the Columbia Correctional Institute in Portage, Wisconsin. And I bring that up because I actually taught a class once at Portage, Wisconsin, so I'm very familiar with that town. So at the time of the Fox Den, which was July 4th weekend, Kutska had actually at that time thought Monfils had committed suicide. It wasn't later on in that summer, that he had read the autopsy and came to believe that Monfils had been murdered. So therefore, he would have never brought up the bubbler scenario to begin with. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting development, and like many things we'll get to in this episode, especially a little bit deeper, things like that were overlooked by the police. Little things like that were ignored, frankly, by the police to keep going on their theory that they were putting forward.
It's interesting, at one point the book actually has a headline that says the bubbler did it. So kind of a joke off of, the butler did it. But Kutska stated that he did not even know about the bubbler scenario until after he was arrested. Therefore, how could he have talked about it at the Fox Den? Uh, what are your thoughts in regards to the bubbler, Mike?
What do you mean? What about the bubbler?
The fact that Kutska said that he wasn't even aware of the scenario until after he was arrested.
Yeah, I think again it shows that things weren't being thoroughly investigated. There were inconsistencies throughout, and those were not really paid much attention to.
According to Mike Pye, Kutska felt his actions caused Monfils to kill himself, and he had a nagging sense of guilt about that. Um, do you think that Kutska was really remorseful?
Well, I don't know if remorseful would be the right word, because I think we can say that we know that he didn't directly have to do anything to do with the death. I mean, we don't believe he killed him. But I do think that he legitimately felt bad about creating the scenario that at that time he believed Tom killed himself as a result of this whole confrontation with the tape. So I don't know if I think it's funny, because I don't know if Keith would do anything differently as far as the way he confronted him. But I still do think that he felt really bad about Tom dying, and I think just because he had died so shortly after this incident, I think anybody would kind of feel somewhat responsible, just because they were the last ones to interact with the guy.
Indeed, yeah. So locals and business leaders in the Green Bay area were contributing money to the Tom Monfils Fund, and both unions at the plant had contributed $25,000. So we just wanted to throw that number out there because we might be coming back to that money and where it ended up a little bit later on. On the 1 year anniversary of Tom's death, which was a Sunday, the Green Bay Press Gazette published a negative article entitled "Workers at the Plant Wish Nightmare Would End." They also featured in that newspaper animated drawings showing how Monfils died and news about Sue Monfils' civil case, which actually mirrored the police theory as far as what happened. Why do you think that the Press Gazette would have done that?
You mean having the two stories in the paper that day?
Yeah, and the cartoon, the illustrations as well, showing what happened.
I'm not 100% sure why. I mean, we know that papers want to make stories that are interesting for readers, and I think that they're just putting together everything that they could to sell papers. I mean, we know they want to sell papers. Do you have any other reasons for them doing that?
I think that they realized that the people in Green Bay were starting to get sort of antsy about this case not being resolved, and they thought that they would kind of help push it along, maybe give it a little push.
Sure. Yeah. What's remembered lives. Losing someone precious from our lives is the most painful event that one can endure. Seasons of Life Memorials is dedicated to making sure the person you lost is never forgotten. We work with you to help you craft a film about your loved one's life that can be viewed at the gravesite. We can also help you create a film about your very own life that can be viewed in the obituary section of your hometown newspaper. Imagine that. Your friends, relatives and neighbors viewing your own unique story and how your life truly did matter. Visit our website, seasonsoflifememorials.com, and follow us on social media today to start viewing what we can do for you.
So the civil suit claimed that Tom's coworkers had beaten him and dropped him in the pulp vat. So that is basically what the police theory was in terms of that. And for the police, for the DA, District Zukowski, and the police, a civil suit came in very handy, as they thought it would help break the Monfil 6 into talking about their guilt. Do you want to talk a little bit about the civil suit, Mike?
Sure. So it was filed by Sue Monfils in 1993 against the same people that were ultimately convicted of the murder. Also, though, I'll add Randy Lepak and Marlon Charles were also subject of the suit, which we know that those two were not part of the Monfils 6, but they were charged with misdemeanors by the police in connection with this case, too. So it really is the same names. And as far as we know, Damon and I have looked into it just from online resources, public court records. It doesn't appear that anything really came of this lawsuit. No settlements or court rulings. It does look like it dragged on for several years. It looks like things were withdrawn in 1998, and then they started up again around 2012, but then were dropped the following year in 2013, and it seems like that's kind of where things ended. So it doesn't appear, we're not 100% sure, but it doesn't appear that Sue Monfils was able to get anything from the Monfils 6.
So cartoonist Joe Heller, who drew the panels, said he got his information from reporters, and the reporters said they got their information from the police. So basically, Joe Heller was drawing what the police had said in this newspaper. And on the third panel he drew, he presented 5 possibilities as to what happened to Monfils after the tape incident. In the first, he confronts Kutska or Hearn. In the second, he goes to the locker room to call the police about the release of the tape. In the third, he goes to the bubbler. In the fourth, he returns to the control room. And in the last one, he leaves in the opposite direction. But this is actually, in this newspaper, in these illustrations, this is where the bubbler story started. So the bubbler story that Keith was unaware of before he got arrested, kind of its origins are in this cartoon. How crazy is that?
Yeah, I'm a little confused. I mean, with the whole going to the bubbler as an option, I mean, I don't get why that would even be like a major possibility, just because, I mean, doesn't that just take like 1 minute? I mean, you go walk to it, get a drink, that's it. You know?
I guess the police had thought maybe some people had seen something, possibly happen. There were rumors in the mill, floating around the mill, about a bubbler.
Yeah.
But that's where it started. That's the police theory of how everything went down. So Detective Sergeant Randy Winkler becomes the lead detective on the case in January of 1994, and he operated on his own for an entire year, basically. Why is that important, that he operated on his own?
Well, I mean, we know that prior to him getting involved, the year before he got involved, so the following year after Monfils was killed or died, uh, nothing really developed. Winkler came on, and well, I think the point of it shows that it wasn't like a group effort. He had kind of control over the whole investigation, where things headed. It seems like he was able to work independently.
Indeed, yeah. So the FBI and Justice Department also got involved in 1994. Uh, they actually told Mike Hearn that he needed a lawyer as the Green Bay Police Department was coming after him. And Mike Pye was also visited by the FBI, who cleared him but warned him about police incompetence that might cost him dearly. What do you, in terms of the FBI, why do you think that they didn't stick around?
I think my guess, I don't know, but I would say just jurisdictional uh, issues. I think they saw that there's really nothing here. This isn't like some big federal case that requires a lot of different, you know, different investigators working on it. I thought it was really saying a lot, though, that, I mean, Mike Hearn was the one who he contacted the FBI through his attorney. This was all his idea. And it wasn't something that the FBI got involved in voluntarily or the Green Bay police contacted because they need assistance. I think it says a lot that that one of the targets of the investigation is asking for the FBI. I think that even speaks a little bit more to the innocence of these people, at least Mike Hearn in this case, because why would you ask the FBI to get involved if you were involved in this?
The police began collecting handwriting samples to see if that might help. And they came across a phone book in Coop 7. Now, written in this phone book was reference to, I think it was page 152. And then when you went to page 152, you saw the address of Monfils and Sue, their house. And then written in the phone book was the statement, "I do not fear death, for in death we seek eternal life." So the police were initially interested in this, but after doing handwriting samples, it came back that the most likely person to have written the note was David Weiner. And because he was sort of a star witness for them, they sort of just dismissed this. What's your take on the whole suicide note?
My take is that should have been investigated further. This is what I was referring to earlier when I said the police stopped investigating things when it no longer fit their theory. This is a great example of that, where it appeared that David Weiner was the suspected author of that note, and when they discovered that, they stopped looking into it. So why would you do that? A normal investigation just follows the evidence, follows the leads where things go. And the lead here is that David Weiner appears to have written it. I'm not saying he did, but it seems like they believed he did from the handwriting. So that should be looked into.
And what a strange thing to write. And why would he write that? So this guy's name just keeps popping up over and over again. He might have more to do with this case than was initially thought. So in April of '94, Winkler found some CIs, which are confidential informants, and this would be Dodie and Scott versus Strott. So Scott, this is how they met each other. Scott and Keith had worked as day laborers for a while. So what do the Verstrats want?
I don't know 100% what they wanted, but it seems like they wanted the reward money. That's why they got involved in this.
So when you originally read this chapter, I remember you told me that this is the point where it starts to become Fargo. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, it reminded me of a Coen Brothers movie. Fargo would be probably most similar, but I mean, most of their films have kind of an oddball. There's kind of a dark humor and oddball element to a lot of their films that involve killings, and usually also some level of incompetence too in the people committing the crimes. And I think this just fits in well with that. This is when it really starts becoming something like one of their movies.
Memento mori. Remember, you must die someday. However, your life can be remembered forever by contacting us at seasonsoflifememorials.com. We are here to teach you how to create a film about your life that can be seen at your future gravesite, as well as within the obituary section of your very own newspaper. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com. So one of the things we want to point out with this business is that in some respects, creating this one of these videos is in a way creating a will for your future kids and grandchildren. Can you explain that, Mike, a little bit more?
Yeah, the legacy video, or really any of the video types that are available, but the legacy ones specifically because that's the one most curated by the loved one when they're still living. It really is. It's not something that that people do just out of kind of like their own self-preservation. It should be really thought of as, this is me telling people, family, friends, how I would like to be remembered, and what I really want people to know about my life and what I did, and how I feel about family members and things like that. It's a great opportunity that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about, where obviously the only time to speak with people once somebody passes is what you leave behind. And so there's plenty of opportunity to leave messages, either through video or notes, but that's not always something people do. And I think a lot of people would really appreciate, I'm referring to the ones who are still around, they would really appreciate a video message or any type of note, just something that can be viewed from somebody who was thinking about them, thinking about the void that they'll leave behind after they're gone. That void can be gone. It can be filled in a little bit through these videos by kind of leaving a message from beyond and letting people know what you thought about them.
And we're back. So the Verstrats agreed to pretend to be friends with the Kutskas while secretly trying to get Keith to admit his guilt in the case. And it got to the point where the Kutskas would actually pretend not to be home just in order to avoid the Verstrats' visits. The Verstrats were much younger and they didn't much have a whole lot in common with them. The Verstrats only seemed to want to talk about the case, said Artie Kutska, and they didn't have much beyond what the newspapers to add. So the Kutskas basically said, we just know what the newspapers are telling us. This is all we have. But how weird would it be that suddenly these people that sort of from out of nowhere just start showing up at your house all the time and wanting to talk about this case that you've been charged with murder. How weird is that?
I think it's very weird, and I actually, in many ways, I'm not sure I believe that Keith and Artie didn't suspect them. I almost think that they would have, just because they came out of nowhere, and that is really all they wanted to talk about. I would probably suspect that.
So Dodie and Scott contributed really nothing, yet they received a rather big chunk of money, reward money. Instead of Mike and I, we both kind of have the viewpoint that they were really just doing this for the cash. And the authors actually, when they were in Zakowski's office, they saw a bunch of tapes that were directly from the Verstrats, and they asked, was there anything about the Fox Den on those tapes? And Zakowski's response was that, there's nothing on those tapes. On one of the tapes, Kutska actually states that he thought Monfils killed himself, or if not, that the real killer hopefully would be caught soon so that his name could be cleared. So on these secretly recorded tapes, Kutska is really just saying what he's telling the police, right?
Yeah, his story is not changing.
So Dodie recorded Kutska stating the following. So I need to read this actually from the book itself. Kutska was talking about getting fired for holding unauthorized union meetings when he played the tape at work. Kutska told the FBI that he did not have the stolen extension cord anymore because he had tossed it out, but if they gave him $5, he would go buy one for them. Kutska was going to hide all his money to avoid paying anything in the civil suit. Kutska was saying that the Monfils investigation was the most expensive investigation in the history of Green Bay. Kutska was saying that the Green Bay city attorney was in as much trouble as he was. And Kutska was saying that he had played the tape for Monfils, but how was he supposed to know that Tom would end up dead? So which of those key points do you think is the most interesting, and why?
I think there's a lot of interesting points there. He's being really candid with Dodie. I think one of them with, avoiding or hiding the money, avoiding paying anything for the civil suit. I was just going to comment on that. One of the things that I don't know if a lot of people are considering is that while he doesn't seem to have been ruled to pay anything to sue Monfils, these civil suits were still costing him thousands of dollars to pay for a defense. So, I mean, even though nothing was settled against him, these suits were still costing everybody a lot of money, dipping into their savings to have a defense.
So on July 17th, Kutska went to the police department to collect paperwork as he wanted to fight the civil suit against Sue. And Dodie actually had called Winkler and told him that Kutska had referred to him as a dumb F word. And at this point, the authors state, they speculate, that Winkler's shaky grip on objectivity must have been severely challenged by this insult, as Winkler was the smart one, as he was having Kutska secretly taped. So what do you think about this dumb F word that Kutska uttered in regard to Winkler?
Yeah, well, first of all, we don't even know if he said that, right? Because that wasn't on one of the recordings.
True.
So my view, I mean, yeah, of course, Kutska could have said that. I actually don't think he even said that. That point where Dodie starts to say that with Kutska criticizing the police, calling them that, and then the stuff that we'll get into in a little bit. That's the point where I actually think Dodie was making everything up.
So Dodie calls Winkler on 9 a.m. on September 6th to say that she had gotten a threatening phone call warning her to back off the case. Later that same day, she paged Winkler to say that Kutska was driving slowly by her house. And Dodie and Scott had told Winkler that they did not want further contact with Kutska. Winkler told them that talking on the phone with Keith was okay, but not to go over to their house anymore for their own safety. However, the authors doubt that the harassing phone call may even took place, and they wanted to point out that Kutska had a rental property that he was getting ready to sell that was near the Verstrat's house. So if he was driving by, there was a point for him to be driving by. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, I again, this whole part with again starting off with the name calling, the criticizing, and then the driving by, and then the phone call, the anonymous phone call. I don't think any of that happened. I think Dodie was making all that up because she wanted to sound like she's bringing value to this when there's really nothing of value there. I think she was trying to get Winkler more like personally invested, where he's not liking Keith. Uh, he's feeling like Keith disrespects him, and I think she was trying to do that to add some urgency to the need of her services. I don't think any of that actually happened.
So after the trial, Scott and Dodie were married, and they were forced into witness protection in central Wisconsin. The authors would come to interview Scott later on, and he and Dodie had split up. However, because they had been legally married, he had child care costs over her two kids. And he was actually given the name Mark Valentino. That was his witness protection name. And he can be found, there was a record of him on February 2nd, 2005, of getting charged with not paying child support. So I thought that was kind of interesting. After the trial, Scott was handed $27,000 by Winkler as a reward for their efforts. And we're guessing maybe some of this money came from that fund that the local businesses had set up. Scott asked, "Where's the rest of the money?" And Winkler's response to him was, "That's all you're getting." Why do you think that they felt entitled to more money?
I don't know, because here's another question. Was there an amount? I mean, the total that we think might have existed was 52,000. If they gave him 27 and then they had another 25, that would total to that. Unless I'm a little confused to where some of these totals are coming from with the money. But was there? We don't even know if there was like an amount that was initially promised to Dodie and Scott, do we? If he's asking where the rest of it is, it kind of sounds like he thought there was a specific amount.
Yeah, it does sound like that. The authors want to point out, though, since the Verstrats were of little to no help in the investigation and they were never used at trial, some questions have to be asked. Why did they receive the reward and a citizenship award as well? Why did they have to go into some kind of witness protection program? Who paid for the witness protection program? Where did the rest of the reward money go? Who made the phone call to intimidate the Verstrats, if there ever was such a call? What exactly did Dodie mean when she stated during an anonymous appearance on Green Bay television a few months later that she knew what she knew would, quote unquote, would bring the Green Bay Police Department to its knees? Was the reward money paid to the Verstrats hush money? Was the witness protection program a way to get them out of the area? Which of those questions do you think needs the most answering?
Oh, let me just look through them real quick, because some of them I think are just are made up. I think if the reward money paid to them was hush money would be something interesting to look into more. And then who paid for the witness protection program, I think, would be something definitely to look into.
New episodes of the Monfil 6 podcast drop every other Friday. Please join us again. Thanks for listening.
Have you recently lost a loved one and want to hold on to their memory forever? Would you like all of the world to view what their life had been about? Seasons of Life Memorials is what you are looking for. We create individual and unique documentary shorts that will allow anyone visiting the gravesite to view the documentary and your memories of the loved one. Contact us today to set up an appointment at seasonsoflifememorials.com.